I can't tell you how honored I am to introduce our next speaker, our first keynote of the day, Michelle Gadsden-Williams. Michelle is the Chief Diversity Officer of BlackRock, so a really big deal. She also just published a new book, her second book, that is called Driven by Intention, and you can buy it on Amazon. And I know you will want to after you hear her talk today. But it's all about purpose and power. And Michelle has had a long and storied career, and she has so much wisdom to share. So, Michelle, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you again for having me join all of you. I'm so excited to be here.
Michelle, I want to start by just going directly to your book, which I had a chance to read this weekend, and it is incredible. You talk so much about intention. You talk about owning your purpose. Can you tell us what that means to you and why you decided to write a book about it?
Well, when I think about purpose in particular, it's really about doing the things that you are uniquely positioned to do. And for me personally, that work is in diversity practice. And that's what I've been doing for the past 34 years. But when I think about purpose, I liken it to this notion of intentionality, hence my reason for writing the book. And so I would define finding your purpose and intentionality. Intention is really a choice with a commitment. It's really understanding your why. It's that spark that ignites that fire within each of us. Not just to have a goal or an aim and deliver on it, but to be planful and purposeful about it. And so when I think about purpose and intention and all of those kinds of things, I think about, what's my inner voice telling me to do? What is that? What is it guiding me to do differently or to do better or to be bolder or faster in terms of how I show up in the world? So it really distinguishes those who seek out their goals from those who get stuck when they encounter obstacles and they're unable to pass them. So I've been incredibly intentional about my purpose, and all that I've ever wanted to do, and I've said this on multiple occasions, is to leave these workplaces in better condition than when I entered, but also to help the next generation of leaders realize what's possible for them. And I do that ultimately by holding myself to a higher standard. And I am ultimately accountable for making those things happen in my life. So when I talk about purpose and when I talk about intentionality, that's what I mean. It's really deconstructing our successes and failures and using those experiences as life lessons that are going to guide us to our next step.
Yeah, there was a great quote in the beginning of the book from your dad. What did he say to you?
Wow, there's so many great quotes. Dad would often say that we are not here on this earth to take up space or to occupy space. We're here to make a difference. And it's up to each of us to determine what that difference is. And as I mentioned, for me, that difference was or is the work that I do in diversity, equity, and inclusion every day.
The other thing that I loved, of many things I loved about your book, but one of the things that the kind of thread I saw through it was there's all these stories of amazing women who've accomplished so much. And they didn't necessarily start out, none of them, I think, started out like right out of college and was like, I know exactly what I want to do, right? They all sort of like journeyed through their path and discovered their intention as they went along. How can we all think about career planning and how do we navigate our careers to achieve ambition and kind of make sure we get in touch with that intention and know how to pursue it?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself the tough questions. What is it that you want out of your career, out of your life? Doing that self-assessment of what are my gifts, understanding what your strengths are, where the opportunities are, and what are some of the kinds of things that you need to do in order to become bigger, better, bolder, faster at what you do. Understanding what gives you fulfillment, because I think we're all going to be working at least a long time, and you want to enjoy and have some gratification in terms of what you do and not languish. What attributes do you enjoy expressing to the world? So I think it's really asking yourself the hard questions and being very honest with yourself in terms of, so once you've asked yourself those questions, It's really identifying, okay, now here's where I want to do this work or what industry I want to go into, and here's how I plan to execute on that work. So it's really bringing all of those things to the forefront and making it happen for yourself in a planful and purposeful way.
So can you tell us a little bit about you and your personal journey and how did you do that?
Wow. So it's really interesting. I have parents who believed in unrelenting straight talk, as I call it. And every morning, from the time I could speak, I'm an identical twin. So my twin sister and I, and my younger sister, my father would ask us the same three questions every day. Who are you? Where do you want to go? What do you want to be? And now those are sophisticated questions to ask kindergartners. And so, I think it was my parents' way of really helping you to articulate your thoughts in a clear and concise way, but also for you to be thoughtful, but also be creative about what's possible for yourself. And so for me, I really wanted to pursue an opportunity in a corporate environment. My father's a retired executive. My mother's an entrepreneur. And so I had role models in the household. And so I knew that whatever it was that I was planning to embark on, that it had to do with a corporate environment of some sort. And so from there, just started thinking about where do I want to disrupt? I'm a change agent. I'm a disruptor. I'm a transformist and a strategist. So those are the things that I enjoy doing. And so for me, it was really about zeroing in on, okay, what industry do I want to do that work in? And then what specific role is going to encompass all of those things? So I started my career in strategic planning, and then I transitioned into human resources because I love people. And so I think it's really all about understanding exactly who you are, what you want to do, the impact that you want to have in these places and spaces where we all work every day, and then executing on the plan. Like, what is the North Star? And speaking that into existence. And I think a lot of my successes had everything to do with my being vocal about what it was that I wanted to do, and also being articulate and very direct about what it was that I did not want to do. And so I've had a meaningful career as a chief diversity officer. I've been doing it for 34 years in several multinational organizations, and I love the work that I do every single day.
So not everyone might not know why what you're doing right now is so on such a huge global stage. BlackRock is a major, major leader in the financial industry, and your CEO, Larry Fink, has really taken a stand and made a difference by saying, I'm going to make my financial power make a change in the world and have outsized influence in terms of purpose. Can you talk about what you're doing and how you're help setting new standards for the financial industry and well beyond for industry at large?
Absolutely. Well, it's a great question. So I chose to join BlackRock in the fall of 2020 for a number of reasons, primarily because I was convinced, based on several conversations with the global executive committee members, including our chairman, Larry Fink, and our president, Rob Capito, that this is an organization that really wants to advance in the DEI space and to become a leader in this area. And as I've mentioned in many other forums, there are three things that I look for in my conversations with CEOs and other leaders when it comes to this work. It's the courage to act, the commitment to lead, and the conviction to change. And if any of those things are missing from that conversation, I tend to look elsewhere. As I've worked for other companies where some of their CEOs tend to oversell what they're doing, and there's no demonstrated commitment or accountability in sight. And so based on my conversations with the leadership at BlackRock 2 years ago almost, and now that I'm on the inside, I'm even more convinced that this is an organization that really wants to get it right. And so like most organizations, I'd say that we are on a very positive trajectory as it pertains to DEI. And given some of the societal injustices that have occurred over the past couple of years, we have a global pandemic that's really changing the paradigm in terms of the ways in which we work. And also, I'd say the discourse, the conversation around racial and social justice in the workplace, the stakes have gone up for a lot of organizations, and we're no different in that respect. So I think we, like most organizations, have really put forth a sense of urgency around this work. And we've evolved in this space of DEI. So the D, as we all know, the differences that we all bring to the table, but we're all focusing more on the E in terms of, the equity. And in my view, that's the most important factor in this entire equation. So I think we're becoming a lot more sophisticated, like most industries around this work. We have a multi-year, multi-dimensional strategy, and we've had some major successes over the past couple of years. But that's not to say that there's not a lot more work to do. And so we have a three-pronged approach, or a three-pronged strategy that's anchored around talent and culture, fiduciary on behalf of clients, and the third pillar is around social impact and policy. And so it's a comprehensive strategy that encompasses everything that we do as an organization. And I think that we continue to make strides in the areas of talent and culture around representation, the ways in which we source talent, advance and develop talent, and retain talent. And then we also do a lot of work in the space of making sure that it's at the heart of everything that we do in terms of our business, in really providing capital to historically undercapitalized communities and giving access and exposure to these underserved communities and that sort of thing. And then the last piece is really around what are some of the kinds of things that we need to do in society to allow our voice to be heard on a variety of topics that we're passionate about that have to do with women and the underrepresented. So there's a lot of goodness that we have going on here at the firm that I'm incredibly proud of. But it's a journey like most organizations, but I'm incredibly proud and privileged to work here.
Michelle, you are genuinely making change in the world from this stage, from this platform, and it's so incredible. And I'm always so blown away by your energy level and how much you accomplish. So how do you do it? How do you find inspiration? What keeps you going?
That's a great question. What keeps me going? Well, first, I love what I do. I've been doing the same type of work for 34 years in a number of different industries. And, my purpose and my intention around the work that I do is very much aligned. And all that I've ever wanted to do, as I mentioned earlier, was to leave the places where I'm employed in better condition than when I entered, but also to allow and to help individuals realize what's possible for them. And I can say that I've done that in every place I've ever been. And so that's what excites me every day when I come into the office. I have an amazing team. I have some of the smartest, brightest, most intellectually curious colleagues on the planet that I get to work with every day. And I get to be tested in this space of DEI. When you've been doing the same kind of work for 34 years, sometimes things can become a little mundane, but then every day you learn something new and different and unique, and I'm able to bring a lot of that into my work. So I am just fulfilled in terms of what I do, and that gives me inspiration. I'm inspired by the people I work with every day, by my team, by the leadership in this organization. So I just find inspiration everywhere.
I love that. You find inspiration and you bring inspiration everywhere. I have definitely seen that firsthand. Um, well, I have more scripted questions for you, but I see a question in the Q&A, and I invite you all to leave questions for Michelle in the Q&A. Someone's asking, how do we expand DE&I to include people with disabilities? And so I think it'd be great if you could talk about that subject, but also if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your own personal story and why that's relevant to you, I think it would mean a lot to the audience.
Absolutely. So to answer the first part of the question, so DEI is a holistic strategy and approach. So it encompasses all dimensions of diversity and not some. So that would also include individuals with disabilities, of course, gender and ethnicity, veterans, LGBTQ plus, introverts, extroverts, neurodiversity, and all those kinds of things. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that diversity is a broad spectrum of a lot of the attributes that we all bring to the table. And this notion of disability is important to me for a number of reasons, primarily because I manage two chronic illnesses every single day. I have lupus, systemic lupus erythematosus, and I also have rheumatoid arthritis. And those two autoimmune diseases, they impact how I show up in the world from time to time. I've been hospitalized as a result of the complexities of both of those illnesses in terms of my ability to function, to walk, to talk. It impacts my memory from time to time. So I'd say that this notion of disability, it's becoming a lot more prevalent in workplaces, at least here at BlackRock. You know, we partner very closely with Disability In, which is one of our key partners. And, you know, we do a lot of, or conduct rather, a lot of master classes and learning opportunities for our employees with autism and all of those kinds of things. I mean, so this notion of disability, it encompasses a huge swath of what disability means. There's invisible disability situations and scenarios, and then there's those that are more visible to all of us. And I probably have the more invisible because sometimes you can't see what I'm suffering with from on a day-to-day basis. But I do check that box because the illnesses that I manage, it does impact how I show up and my physical being. So I'd say if disability is not part of your corporation's agenda from a DEI perspective, I would suggest that you raise that with your Chief Diversity Officer or your CHRO to make sure that it becomes part of that conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Michelle. So, can you talk a little bit about your work life? How do you manage, by the way, huge job, also writing a book, and also manage wellness, especially in light of these conditions?
Life work integration, as I call it. I've never called it life work balance. I'm just one of those individuals. I have not been able to figure it out. It's something that I wrestle with every day. But wellness is certainly a part of my regimen, at least over the past, I'd say 5 to 10 years, where I've been a little bit more proactive about the things that I need to do. So I don't travel as much as I used to because that impacts my wellness. I work out, I eat clean. So I put a lot of things in place that keep me healthy, that keep me grounded, that keep me focused. So I'd say that life work integration or life work balance, that's something that I continue to wrestle with. I think a lot of us do. But I think that there are some things that I do for myself in trying to maintain a sense of wellness for myself. And a lot of that has to do with taking the time to work out, to eat healthy, to exercise, and to stay off of planes where I can, and trains and automobiles and traveling and all those kinds of things. And stress is not my friend either. So I try to minimize as much as I can. I don't think there's a stress-free life that most of us live, but where I can minimize the stress, where it's going to have a severe impact on me, I certainly will try to do that as well.
And even though your career trajectory has just been astronomical, I'm sure along the way you've faced obstacles or challenges. How have you handled those?
Wow. And yes, I think most of us have had some missteps, mistakes, mishaps that have happened over the years. And I typically look at these experiences as lessons learned and chalk them up to experiences. One of the things that I've said on a frequent basis is that I see the good in all things, and every experience that I've had in my career has been a roadmap that has allowed me to stretch and to grow and to learn in a lot of different ways. Every point of confusion has been insight for me. Every fail is a step in the right direction, and every risk that I've taken has had a reward in the end. So I'd just say stay the course and forge ahead, but give yourself grace to get past that misstep, mistake. We all make them. And if there's any, I would challenge any leader out there who says that, oh, I've never had a misstep or a mistake. I don't think they're being truthful and honest because we've all made those mistakes. But I think the lesson learned in it is really what most people will pay attention to.
I don't know about everybody else, but I just wrote down every point of confusion is a moment of insight. That's pretty profound, Michelle. So I want to turn to the topic of relationships.
Yeah.
You are an amazing rainmaker. You know a lot of amazing people. And we're all here to do a little networking, and networking has been hard in this virtual world. And in fact, in your book, I loved that um, someone said, one of your interviewees said, I really don't like networking, but I still do it anyway. Can you talk about how you've built relationships throughout your career?
One of the most profound books that I've ever read early on in my career is called The Personal Touch by Terry Williams. And in that book, it really teaches the reader how to extend yourself in casual ways, informal ways, to cultivate, maintain, and sustain relationships. That book is my Bible. It's old now and torn and tattered, but every mentee or sponsee that I've had over the years, I've given them this book. I I'm an extrovert by nature, and I enjoy people. And so when I meet a person, if anything in this work of DEI and organizational development, a lot of us are trained to listen and to listen hard. And so when I meet people, I'm listening intently to what they're saying to me. And I love stories. And I love the stories of women, the stories of people. And so as I'm listening intently, I'm listening for, what's that nugget of wisdom that that person's going to share with me. And so I do that with every interaction, whether it's a stranger or a person I've known for 30 years. So I think that the cultivation of my network, my ecosystem, as I call it, has served me incredibly well. And I think that if networking is something that you despise or you don't like it, I'd say I would challenge you to do the things that scare you the most. Do that thing. Walk up to someone, extend yourself, even if it's in a casual way, to that individual. You never know who you're going to run into. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to a dinner. It was called the Influencers Dinner. I don't know how or why I was invited to this dinner. And there were 25 individuals, most of us strangers. They didn't tell you who was going to be there. All you needed to do was to show up. And lo and behold, I met an astronaut. I met a restaurateur. I met the founder of Bombas. I met the founder of City Bike. Just an array, just a wonderful mosaic of individuals who I thought were just outstanding. And the rules were when you met this person, all you needed to do was tell them your name. That was it. And they had to guess who you were based on limited information. And I loved it. And so I think that, it's doing the things that are going to have and to reap a benefit. And when you think about your ecosystem, your network, I just tend to extend myself to anyone and everyone that I can learn something from. And I would encourage all of you to do the same. I've exploded my network. I've embraced the things that I'm passionate about, and I've sought out experiences that have allowed me to get closer to the North Star, to the dream. And I think we should all do some variation of that. Each of us has a slice of genius that we can extend to someone else. Find that slice of genius with that person who you're interacting with. You never know who you might be talking to.
Well, that's pretty inspiring and also a little terrifying. I think we all sort of hear you say, do the things that scare you, and it's like, yes, no, no.
Yeah, it's
So the last,
interesting. The most profound book that I've read is Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes.
I love that.
Shonda Rhimes was a severe introvert, and her entire book talks about how terrified she was to speak publicly. It's doing the things, forcing yourself to do the things that scare you the most. I'll share one more story. So last fall, I have this fear of heights slightly. And one of the things I've always wanted to do was to skydive. So one day I took the day off from work. I drove to this location. I scheduled an appointment with a Navy SEAL who was my trainer, and I skydove or jumped out of an airplane 30,000 feet up in the air to the earth. And it was the most liberating experience of my life. I was terrified, but at the same time, I was liberated because I felt free from that fear. And I think that, your dreams are the purest form of your potential. And that experience just felt liberating to me. I felt like, okay, on to the next. Like, what else can I conquer here? So yeah, move past the fear and do the things that scare you the most.
I cannot believe you went skydiving.
I sure did.
I will never ever go skydiving, and I'm okay with that. um, so my last question for you before we open it up is this. Our theme today is lifting as we climb. And I think, when I hear from our community, what I'm hearing is we're all feeling a little like back on our heels and like our career isn't advancing and we're not in a position that we want to be. And so my question to you is, even when we feel that way, how do we all make time to advocate for each other and make sure we're bringing others along? How can we think about being deliberate about bringing others along, even as we're fighting the fight every day?
My indelible responsibility, our indelible responsibility to ensure that we are lifting as we climb. It is our job to make sure that we champion, that we advocate, that we empower, that we encourage the next generation of leaders, women leaders, to realize what's possible for them. And there are a number of ways that you can do that. I think if you're a leader, if you're a people leader, whatever dimension of leadership you are demonstrating today in terms of what's in front of you, I think it is our responsibility to make sure that the next generation of leaders realize that it's possible. And so it's up to us to make sure that in these rooms, in these boardrooms, in these spaces where we all are, that making sure that we allow them to have the space to speak up, that we allow their voices to be heard, that we recognize them in real time, that we demonstrate our support for these women in public at any given moment. These are some of the kinds of things that we need to do and do them consistently. There's no rolling up of the drawbridge. Those days are long gone as far as I'm concerned. It is our responsibility to ensure that another woman succeeds, and it is up to us to ensure that that happens in whatever way possible. So that's just my position on it, but lift as you climb. That's what I believe, and I believe it was Maya Angelou who talked a lot about that. We should lift as we climb.
Amazing. And you are certainly living those values every day. Um, so the first question I'm going to ask you from the audience is from somebody who's having a hard time getting her company to get serious about a DE&I strategy. What advice do you give someone who's in that position?
That's a great question. I would say um, understanding. So, what is the DEI strategy? Well, first of all, why do you believe it's important to embark on the DEI? Having a very succinct and clear articulation of what that business case looks and feels like, making sure you have resources behind you to get the work done, but also making sure that from the top down, this has to be a strategy that everyone embraces, but everyone should understand the why and the wherefore. So I think it's important to really understand why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, and execute on the work. Who do you need to rally around you to make sure that those messages are cascading up, down, and sideways within the organization? And then if it's not something that's talked about frequently, I would raise it with your heads of HR or your chief diversity officer or whomever is in that leadership capacity to make sure that it happens. One of the things that we do here consistently is we have a DEI annual report where we talk about DEI in all of its forms across the organization. We have a DEI town hall that is separate and aside from our business town halls because our chairman, Larry Fink, wants to talk about DEI separate and aside from everything else so it doesn't get diluted in everything else that we're doing. So we're very precise about how we talk about it. I'm very consistent, and the cadence is throughout the entire organization. And we're very clear about it. And during our last, I remember this, a year ago when I first joined the firm, over a year ago, our chairman said, we are principled around this work. And if you're not, then you might want to consider employment elsewhere. Now, that's a bold statement, but it was the shot and the cry heard around the world. And make no mistake, if you are not on board with this, and if you're not demonstrating your commitment to it, then perhaps this is not the place for you. I think sometimes it requires that level of bold articulation of why.
Yeah, well, and it's also a galvanizing principle. Everyone there knows what they're about, right? And signed up for it. It's really incredible. We have another question in the Q&A about job qualifications, and this is coming up a lot too. I mean, we're seeing record levels of unemployment or of employment, right? Lowest unemployment levels ever. And yet there's been research that showed that there's all these hidden workers who still can't find the work that they want. And a lot of it is because of the precision and demands around job qualifications. How can we start to get our organizations to think beyond their strict job requirements to expand and hire people who may not meet them exactly?
So if I understand the question correctly, is the question more around being flexible in terms of qualifications where individuals don't have to check every box? Okay.
Exactly. And how do we get hiring managers thinking more broadly?
Yeah, I think it requires, well, first of all, you have to meet people where they are on this topic of representation and diverse hiring and all of those kinds of things. The bottom line is we're not going to compromise quality just to bring in a diverse candidate. That's the first thing. So assuming that the person has the minimal requirements for the job, um, I think it requires a conversation with the hiring manager to say, this person might not check every single box, but they have potential and here's why. They have runway and here's why. So I think it's really having that conversation with the hiring manager to just have a level of openness around looking at individuals who might have other capabilities and skills that might be a benefit for that particular role. So I think it really requires a conversation and some coaching relative to the hiring manager around, what is it that you're looking for? And does that person have to check every single box? And if they do, why? Why do they have to check every single box? So again, it's a conversation that needs to be had, but you have to meet people where they are on this.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's this like epidemic of these laundry list job descriptions where it's like you have to have actually done 10,000 things before to do this job, which we know really can't be the case. Um,
Exactly.
so, Michelle, we're almost out of time. If I were to just give you the floor back for one moment, what is the one piece of advice you'd like to leave our audience with today at this Inspiration Summit?
Oh, piece of advice. I would say when you think about your career, when you think about your purpose and your intention, and intention is just one of those words that I just fell in love with many years ago. Um, do the things that are going to test you in a lot of different ways, that are going to stretch you in a lot of different ways, so that you can become bigger, better, and bolder at what you do. I think it's table stakes. Um, Intelligence, at least in my view, and in some of the industries where I've worked, being smart is not enough. I think it requires other things. Intellectual horsepower is not enough. You wouldn't be there if you weren't smart. I think leadership and all of these things that we're talking about require other things. So I'd say focus on some of the other attributes that you bring to the table. But I think the undergird of all of this and the foundation of success is really around purpose. Are you doing the things that you are uniquely positioned to do? And if not, figure out what that is.
Well, as always, you have been incredibly, incredibly inspiring. I want to tell the audience one more time, Michelle has this amazing new book out called Driven by Intention. Please check it out. And Michelle, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to BlackRock.